Christmas is supposed to be a time of comfort. Warm lights, familiar faces, and the feeling that you're safe inside while the cold stays outside. But for some people, Christmas night is when everything goes wrong. The stories you're about to hear are all said to be true. Real experiences shared by people who thought they were about to enjoy a normal Christmas, until something disturbing happened in the quiet hours of the night. From unexplained visitors who arrived after midnight, to gifts that appeared without anyone leaving them, to houses that felt wrong the moment the sun came up on Christmas morning. These aren't stories about monsters or jump scares. They're about moments that felt real, moments where something didn't make sense, and the fear came from knowing it shouldn't be happening. So before you listen, take a look around. Make sure your doors are locked. And remember, Christmas is one of the few nights of the year when people assume nothing bad will happen. For the people in these stories, that assumption was the worst mistake they could have made. This happened on Christmas Eve about 4 years ago, when I was still living alone in a small rental house just outside town. It was nothing special, one bedroom, a tiny living room, and a porch that faced the street. But it was cheap, quiet, and close to work, so I didn't complain. That year, I wasn't traveling home for Christmas. My family lived a few states away, and I'd volunteered to work the days after Christmas, so I stayed behind. I spent Christmas Eve doing exactly what you'd expect. Microwaved food, a couple of drinks, and some random movie playing quietly in the background. By around midnight, the neighborhood was completely silent. Fresh snow covered the street, the sidewalks, and my front yard. No cars, no people, just that soft glow from streetlights reflecting off the snow. I was getting ready to head to bed when I heard it. A knock at the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 slow, deliberate knocks. At first, I thought maybe I imagined it. Nobody should have been out that late, especially with the snow coming down. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Then the knock came again. Same rhythm, same calm pace. I walked to the window beside the door and peeked through the curtain. The porch light was on, illuminating the snow perfectly. There was no one there. But what caught my attention immediately were the footprints. Fresh footprints in the snow, leading straight up to my front door, and stopping there. I stood there longer than I probably should have, staring at the footprints through the thin curtain. They were deep and clear, like whoever made them had been standing there for a while. The snow was still coming down lightly, which meant they had to be fresh. I opened the door just an inch, enough for the cold air to rush in and sting my face. The porch was empty. No movement, no sound. I stepped outside, boots crunching softly in the snow, and leaned forward to inspect the footprints. They came straight from the sidewalk to my door. No hesitation, no wandering, just a direct path. But what made my stomach tighten was the way they ended. There were no footprints leading away. I checked both directions along the sidewalk. Nothing. The snow there was untouched, smooth like a blank sheet. Whoever had knocked hadn't walked back the way they came. I told myself they must have stepped off the porch and the snow covered it already. That explanation felt weak, but it was the only one that made sense. I shut the door, locked it, and turned the porch light off. I tried to go back to my movie, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to the front door. The house felt different now, not louder or darker, just aware. About 10 minutes later, I heard something else. A soft scrape. It came from the front of the house, near the door. Not a knock this time, more like the sound of something brushing against wood. I muted the TV and listened. Then came a slow, careful knock again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm. This time, I didn't go to the door. I stayed on the couch, holding my breath, staring at it from across the room. The knock stopped, but I could feel that whoever was outside hadn't left. That's when my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "I know you're home." My chest tightened instantly. I hadn't posted anything online. I hadn't told anyone I was staying in town for Christmas. No one should have known I was inside that house. Another message came through before I could respond. "It's cold out here." I got up slowly and checked the front window again. The porch light was still off, but the street light across the road cast enough glow to see the snow clearly. The footprints were still there, but now there was something else. A second set had appeared, standing right behind the first, closer to the door. Too close. Like whoever was there had stepped forward while I wasn't looking. My phone buzzed again. "Please." That word hit harder than the others. It didn't feel threatening. It felt patient, like whatever was outside knew it had time. I backed away from the door and grabbed the small baseball bat I kept beside the couch. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was echoing through the house. Then the doorknob moved, just slightly, as if someone outside was testing it. The doorknob stopped moving the second I noticed it, like whoever was outside realized I was watching. I stood there frozen, gripping the bat so tight my knuckles hurt. The house was silent again. No knocking, no scraping, no sound of footsteps walking away. Then my phone vibrated. Another message from the same unknown number. "Why won't you open the door?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't moved. There was no way anyone outside should have known I was standing right there. I typed back with shaking hands. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "You know who I am." Before I could even process that, the porch light suddenly turned on by itself, flooding the front of the house in harsh yellow light. I took a step closer and looked through the peephole. Someone was standing there. A man, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s, dressed in a thick winter coat and gloves. His face looked normal, pale from the cold, eyes wide, mouth slightly open like he'd been standing there for a long time. But what made my blood run cold was his smile. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't angry. It was strained, like he was forcing his face to remember how to look human. His eyes suddenly flicked upward, locking directly onto the peephole. He knew I was looking. He raised his hand slowly and knocked again. 3 knocks. This time, louder. "Please," he said, his voice muffled through the door. "It's Christmas." I stepped back, shaking my head, whispering to myself that I wasn't opening it. I didn't care who he was or what he wanted. Then he leaned forward until his forehead rested against the door, and in a calm, steady voice, he said something that made my heart stop. "I've already been inside." Before I could react, there was a loud bang, not at the door, but at the back of the house. Glass shattered. The sound came from the kitchen. I spun around just in time to hear heavy footsteps moving through the house, fast and purposeful, coming toward the living room. At the same moment, the man outside began laughing. Not loud, not hysterical, just quiet, satisfied chuckling. The front doorknob started twisting violently, and the footsteps inside were getting closer. I don't remember much after that. I remember running. I remember the sound of my own breathing drowning everything else out. I remember grabbing my phone and locking myself in the bathroom as the sound of movement echoed through the house. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. By the time they got there, the house was silent again. The back kitchen window was shattered outward, glass scattered across the snow outside. There were muddy footprints inside the kitchen, large, heavy ones, but none of them led anywhere specific. They just stopped, like the person wearing them had vanished mid-step. The officers searched every room, every closet, even the attic. They found no one. When they asked about the man at the front door, I told them everything. One of the officers went quiet and asked me to step outside. The footprints at my front door were still there, but now there were only one set, leading up to the door. None inside, none leaving. I didn't sleep in that house again. I stayed with a coworker until my lease ended and moved out as soon as I could. Every Christmas since then, I keep my lights off and my phone on silent. I don't answer unexpected knocks. I don't look through the peephole, because sometimes, late at night, when the snow is falling just right, I still get a message from an unknown number. It's always the same. "Merry Christmas," and no matter how fast I block it, it always comes back the next year. When this happened, I was 9 years old, living with my parents and younger sister in a small house that always felt colder in winter than it should have. Christmas was usually the one time of year that house felt warm. That year, everything seemed normal. We decorated the tree together, wrapped gifts in the living room, and left cookies and milk out before going to bed. My parents were strict about one thing. No one touched the presents until morning. I remember waking up in the middle of the night because I had to use the bathroom. The house was dark except for the Christmas tree lights glowing softly in the living room. On my way back to my room, I stopped. There was something under the tree that hadn't been there before. A small present, wrapped in plain brown paper. No ribbon, no tag. It sat apart from the others, pushed slightly forward like it wanted to be noticed. At first I thought maybe my parents had forgotten one, but they always used colorful wrapping paper, and they always labeled everything. This one looked rushed. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it for a few seconds before going back to bed, telling myself I'd ask about it in the morning. But I didn't sleep well after that. I kept thinking about that gift, where it came from, who wrapped it, and why it was sitting there alone. When Christmas morning finally came and we rushed into the living room, I immediately looked under the tree. The brown package was still there, but now, written neatly on the paper in black marker, was my name. I stood there staring at the present while my parents and sister tore into their gifts around me. The room was loud with laughter and wrapping paper, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. "Mom?" I asked, pointing at the brown package. "Who's that from?" She glanced at it, frowned slightly, and shook her head. "That's not from us," she said. "Maybe it's a joke gift your dad picked up." My dad looked over, clearly confused. "Nope, never seen it." That should have been the end of it. They should have taken it away. But instead, my mom smiled and said, "Well, it has your name on it. Go ahead." I remember feeling a weird mix of excitement and fear as I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. The paper was cold, almost damp, like it had been left outside. I peeled back the wrapping slowly. Inside was a shoebox. No brand, no writing, just plain cardboard, taped shut. My parents were watching now, smiling nervously. My sister leaned closer, curious. I lifted the lid. Inside was an old toy train. It was metal, scratched and rusted in places, clearly not new. The wheels were stiff, and one side was dented inward. It looked like something from decades ago. My dad laughed awkwardly. "Guess Santa hit a yard sale," he joked. But what made my stomach drop was the note folded beneath the train. It was written in the same black marker. "You left this behind." I felt my throat tighten. I had never owned a toy like that, I was sure of it. But when I picked it up, something clicked. I remembered it. Not clearly, just flashes. Sitting on the floor of a different house, a cold basement, playing alone. I suddenly felt sick. My mom noticed my face and took the box away. She said maybe it belonged to the previous owners. Maybe someone dropped it off by mistake. They threw the box and wrapping paper into the trash that afternoon. That night, after dinner and relatives left, I went to bed early. I couldn't stop thinking about the train, about that feeling of remembering something I shouldn't. Around midnight, I woke up to a sound, a soft clicking noise, like metal wheels slowly turning. It was coming from downstairs, from the living room. The clicking sound was slow and uneven, like something old struggling to move. I lay still in bed, staring at my door, listening as the noise echoed faintly through the house. Click, clack, click, clack. It was coming from downstairs. I told myself it was just the house settling, maybe a decoration falling over. But deep down, I knew exactly what it sounded like. Metal wheels. I pulled the blanket over my head and squeezed my eyes shut, hoping the sound would stop. It didn't. Instead, it got closer. The clicking shifted from the living room to the hallway to right below my bedroom door. Then, it stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, something scraped lightly against the door. Not a knock, not a push, just a soft drag, like metal brushing against wood. My bedroom door creaked open slowly. I peeked out from under the blanket just enough to see the hallway lights spilling into my room. And sitting on the floor, right outside my door, was the toy train. The same one my parents had thrown in the trash. It looked cleaner now, less rusted, like it had been polished. The wheels twitched slightly, turning on their own. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Then I saw something behind it. A shadow stretched along the hallway wall, tall and thin, bending at an angle that didn't match the ceiling light. It didn't move like a person stepping forward. It slid. A voice whispered from the hallway, low and close, like it was right beside my ear. "You remembered." The train rolled forward an inch. I shut my eyes and screamed as loud as I could. Lights snapped on. Footsteps thundered down the hall. My parents burst into the room and grabbed me, asking what was wrong. When I pointed to the doorway, the hallway was empty. No train, no shadow. The next morning, my dad found the trash bags torn open outside. The shoebox was gone. Only one thing was left behind, resting neatly on top of the snow. The note, still folded, still addressed to me. My parents tried to convince themselves it was just a prank. Maybe a neighbor's kid. Maybe someone digging through the trash and messing with us. But none of that explained how the train made it from the trash to my bedroom door without waking anyone up. They never called the police. They didn't want to scare us more than we already were. Christmas decorations came down the next day. Years passed. We moved out of that house when I was 12. Life went on, but the memory of that night never faded. Especially the feeling that the gift didn't belong to that house, or that time. When I was in college, my parents finally told me something they'd kept to themselves. Before my sister was born, before I was old enough to remember clearly, I used to talk about an imaginary friend, a man who lived in the basement of our old house, a man who would give me toys to keep me quiet. When they sold that house, they left everything behind in the basement, including a small metal toy train. I don't celebrate Christmas much anymore. I don't like gifts without tags, and I never leave the tree lights on overnight, because every few years, on Christmas Eve, I wake up to the faint sound of metal wheels turning somewhere in the dark, and I'm always afraid to look at my bedroom door, wondering if something I left behind has finally come back for me. Christmas morning is supposed to be loud. Kids running down the hallway, parents calling out from the kitchen, the sound of wrapping paper tearing open. That's why the silence is the first thing I remember. I woke up just after sunrise, expecting to hear my parents already moving around downstairs. My younger brother usually couldn't stay in bed past 6 a.m. on Christmas, but that morning, the house felt empty, too empty. I called out my mom's name. No answer. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. Every door was open. My parents' room, my brother's room, even the bathroom, all empty. At first, I thought maybe they'd gone out to grab something last minute, but then I noticed the living room lights were on. The Christmas tree was glowing. I walked downstairs slowly, my stomach tightening with each step. The living room looked perfect, almost too perfect. Every present was neatly arranged. Stockings were filled and hanging straight. Cookies were gone from the plate, and the milk glass was empty. But there was no mess, no wrapping paper, no signs anyone had been there. I stood there alone, listening to the hum of the heater and the soft buzz of the tree lights. That's when I noticed something else. The front door was wide open. Cold air poured into the house, carrying the smell of snow and pine. But there were no footprints outside, not in the yard, not on the porch. It was as if everyone inside the house had simply vanished. I stood in the living room for a full minute, just listening. No footsteps upstairs, no voices outside, not even a car passing on the street. I walked to the front door and looked out. The porch was dusted with snow, smooth and untouched. The driveway was empty. My parents' car was gone, but there were no tire tracks leading away. The snow looked like it had never been disturbed. That's when the fear really set in. I grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter and tried calling my mom. It rang until it went to voicemail. Same with my dad. Same with my brother's phone. No one answered. I checked the clock on the microwave. 7:18 a.m. Not late, not early, just normal. I went back into the living room and noticed something I hadn't before. Every present had a tag. All of them were neatly written in the same handwriting, including ones meant for my parents. That didn't make sense. They usually wrapped gifts for each other later at night, messy and rushed. I picked one up and turned it over. From you. My stomach tightened. I checked another one. Same thing. Every single gift under the tree, even the ones clearly meant for my parents, said they were for me. I dropped the box and backed away, my heart pounding. I hadn't wrapped any of these. I hadn't even been downstairs the night before after going to bed. That's when I heard something upstairs, a floorboard creak. I froze, staring at the staircase. Another creak followed, slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. Relief hit me first. Maybe they were home. Maybe this was all just some weird misunderstanding. "Mom?" I called out. The creaking stopped. Then I heard my brother's voice. "Hey!" It came from the top of the stairs. Quiet, flat. I felt my shoulders relax as I took a step forward. "Where did you guys go?" There was a long pause. Then his voice came again, same tone, same volume. "We're here now." Something about it felt wrong. My brother always talked fast, always joked. This didn't sound like him at all. I climbed halfway up the stairs and looked down the hallway. Every bedroom door was open, every room empty. My heart dropped. "I can see you," my brother's voice said again. This time it came from behind me. I spun around. No one was there. Then, very slowly, I noticed something in the reflection of the living room window. Figures, standing just outside the house, perfectly still, watching. The figures outside didn't move. They just stood there in the snow, lined up along the edge of the yard, facing the house. There were 3 of them. Adult height, child height, adult height again. My heart started hammering as I realized what I was looking at. They were shaped like my parents and my brother. I backed away from the window, my legs trembling so badly I nearly fell. My phone buzzed in my hand. An incoming call. Dad. Relief surged through me. My thumb hit accept instantly. "Where are you?" I blurted out. For a second, there was only static. Then his voice came through. Calm, steady, wrong. "We came home," he said. "Why aren't you letting us in?" My blood ran cold. "I'm inside," I whispered. "I've been inside the whole time." Another pause. Then my mom's voice joined the call, overlapping his. "You already opened the door," she said gently. "Don't you remember?" The front door creaked. I turned just in time to see it slowly swing inward, cold air flooding the living room again. Snowflakes drifted across the floor, melting instantly on the carpet. Footsteps followed. 3 sets. Heavy. Familiar. They moved through the house like they owned it, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. I could hear them downstairs, walking through the living room, stopping near the tree. My brother laughed softly. "Merry Christmas," he said. I ran. I sprinted up the stairs and locked myself in my bedroom, pressing my back against the door. From the hallway, I heard my parents' voices calling my name. Patient, calm, disappointed. "Come out," my mom said. "You're ruining Christmas," my dad added. Something scraped against my door. Not knocking, not pounding, just slow pressure, like hands pressing flat against the wood. The tree lights downstairs flickered. Then everything went quiet. No voices, no footsteps, just silence. I stayed there until my legs gave out and I slid down to the floor, staring at the crack beneath the door. That's when I saw it. 3 shadows, standing right outside. I don't know how long I stayed there, sitting on the floor with my back against the door. Minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, the shadows beneath the door faded. The house fell completely silent again. When I finally worked up the courage to open my bedroom door, the hallway was empty. The air felt warmer, normal, like nothing had happened. Downstairs, the living room looked untouched. The tree lights were still on. The presents were still neatly arranged, but something was different. Every gift under the tree had been opened. The wrapping paper was stacked neatly beside each box, folded like someone had taken their time. Inside each one was the same thing: old family photos, photos I'd never seen before, pictures of my parents standing in front of our house, years before I was born, pictures of my brother as a baby, but I was nowhere in them. And then pictures of Christmas mornings where the tree was lit, the gifts were open, and everyone was smiling, except there was always an empty space where I should have been. My parents came home around noon. They said they'd gone out early to visit a neighbor who'd had an emergency. They swore they'd told me before going to bed. When I asked about the open door, the footprints, the voices, they just looked at me strangely. "We didn't leave the door open," my mom said. "And what footprints?" my dad asked. "That was years ago. I don't live with them anymore. But every Christmas morning, no matter where I am, I wake up before sunrise. And for just a moment, before I move, before I speak, I'm terrified that I'll hear familiar footsteps downstairs and realize the house is empty again."